Father Michael Donovan had been the heart of St. Bridget's Catholic Church for 26 years. In the sprawling brick building on the corner of 8th and Ashland in Newark, New Jersey, his deep voice had delivered thousands of homilies. His hands had blessed countless newborns, and his quiet counsel had steered more than a few troubled souls away from ruin. He was known for his gentle smile, his habit of carrying butterscotch candies for the neighborhood kids, and for always showing up. Whether it was a midnight hospital call, a funeral on the coldest winter morning, or a domestic dispute where the police called him in just to calm things down. The man was, in every sense, untouchable, not because he was above reproach, but because he had lived a life where reproach simply never had a foothold. Yet on the morning of July 14th, everything that reputation stood for would be put to the test. A morning like any other, at first. The sun rose pale over Newark that Tuesday, washing the streets in a thin gold light. Father Michael woke early, as always, in the rectory apartment above the church's main offices. His small kitchen smelled of fresh coffee, dark roast, always 2 sugars, no cream, as he opened his Bible and read from Psalms before breakfast. He wasn't due at the airport for another 3 hours, but his suitcase was already packed neatly by the door. Inside, a crisp black suit, 2 clerical collars, a well-worn missal, and a small leather-bound journal for notes. He was flying to Chicago to deliver a keynote speech at a Catholic charity conference, a gathering of priests and lay leaders working on urban poverty initiatives. Travel for him was nothing new. Over the years, he'd flown to conferences in Boston, Atlanta, San Diego, even Rome. But Newark Liberty International was always busy, and he liked to be early. By 8:15 a.m., he locked up the rectory, suitcase in hand, and strolled toward the church parking lot. Mrs. Santiago, one of his longtime parishioners, waved from across the street. "Safe travels, Father," she called. "Thank you, Maria. I'll bring you back a fridge magnet." He joked, and she laughed. Newark Liberty was its usual mix of controlled chaos. Luggage wheels rattling over tile, the hiss of espresso machines, boarding announcements echoing in the background. Father Michael, in his plain black travel jacket and collar, checked in quickly and moved towards security. He had just passed through TSA when it happened. Near the gate area, a young man in a faded denim jacket was struggling with an overstuffed black roller bag. He looked flustered, muttering under his breath as he fumbled with the handle. His boarding pass clung between his fingers, and sweat was already darkening the fabric at his armpits. "Excuse me, sir. Could you maybe give me a hand? My connecting flight's boarding soon, and this thing's heavier than it looks." The words were rushed but polite. Father Michael glanced at his own carry-on, just a small suitcase, and then back at the young man. Helping people, especially strangers, wasn't just a habit for him, it was instinct. "Of course," he said, smiling. "Where are you headed?" "Dallas. Just need to get this on the scale real quick. You're a lifesaver, man." Father Michael took the handle. The bag was heavier than expected, but he'd carried heavier loads while helping parishioners move furniture for charity events. Together, they wheeled it toward the counter. They didn't walk far before the young man's phone rang. He stepped aside, mumbling something about needing to take the call, and gestured for Father Michael to keep moving toward the counter. It was such a casual moment that Father Michael didn't even think twice about it. Boarding for his own flight to Chicago was just beginning when 2 uniformed airport police officers approached him. "Sir, could you step over here for a moment?" one asked, his tone polite but firm. Father Michael assumed it was a routine baggage check, maybe random security. He followed them to a small table just off to the side, where another officer was already unzipping the black roller bag. The young man was nowhere to be seen. The zipper peeled open to reveal several large, tightly wrapped packages, each the size of a loaf of bread. Brown tape glistened under the fluorescent lights. The officer sliced one open with a pocket knife. A fine white powder spilled out onto the inspection tray. The change in the officer's demeanor was immediate. "Sir, you're under arrest for possession and transportation of a controlled substance." Father Michael's heart seemed to stop. No, that's not my bag. The words blurred as cold metal cuffs clicked around his wrists. Public shock. Within minutes, he was escorted through the terminal. Travelers turned to stare. Phones came up. Someone shouted, "Is that a priest?" A woman gasped loudly and whispered to her friend. The ride from the terminal to the Port Authority police station on airport grounds felt endless. His mind replayed the moment he'd taken the bag handle. The young man's face, the quick phone call, the way he disappeared. All of it suddenly looked different in hindsight. That evening he sat in a hold-in cell, his collar still on but slightly askew, his suitcase untouched in the corner. He'd been fingerprinted, photographed, and had his personal items logged. The charges were read to him: possession with intent to distribute, interstate trafficking. They told him the street value of the drugs in that bag, over $500,000. The words washed over him in a kind of stunned haze. He knew he was innocent. God knew he was innocent. But innocence, he was starting to realize, didn't automatically keep you free. And somewhere in the city, news outlets were already running the headline: Newark priest arrested in major airport drug bust. The real nightmare was just beginning. It was past midnight when two detectives entered. One was tall, bald, and broad-shouldered, with the clipped speech of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. The other was younger, restless, and had a habit of tapping his pen against the table. "Father Michael Donovan," the older one began, opening a manila folder. "Been at St. Bridget's how long?" 26 years. He glanced at the younger detective, then back at Father Michael. "And in that time, ever been arrested?" "No." "Ever been in possession of narcotics?" "Absolutely not." The younger one leaned forward. "We got 15 kilos of uncut heroin in a bag that you were wheeling through Newark Liberty. That's not a misunderstanding, Father. That's a felony that'll bury you for decades." Father Michael shook his head. "That bag wasn't mine. I was helping a young man who asked me to—" "What young man?" "I don't know his name." "Description?" "He had on a denim jacket, mid-20s maybe. Said he was catching a connecting flight to Dallas." The detectives exchanged a glance. The younger one smirked as if to say, "That's all you've got?" "Father, we get it. You're respected, you're trusted, but mules, drug couriers, are picked for exactly that reason. Nobody suspects a priest. It's perfect cover." By morning, the story had spread beyond Newark. It was on the local news in Chicago, where he'd been scheduled to speak. The headline scrolled across the bottom of the screen: "Respected Newark priest arrested with large quantity of heroin at airport." At St. Bridget's, parishioners gathered in the church hall in stunned disbelief. Maria Santiago, who had waved to him just the day before, clutched her rosary so tightly the beads dug into her palms. "This has to be a mistake," she kept saying. "Father Michael would never." 2 days later, he was led into the courtroom for his arraignment. His hands were cuffed in front of him, his clerical collar still in place. The gallery was packed: reporters, parishioners, curious strangers. The prosecutor, a sharp-featured woman named Elaine Keating, didn't bother hiding her contempt. She laid out the charges with crisp precision: possession with intent to distribute a controlled substance, interstate drug trafficking, conspiracy to distribute narcotics. She recommended no bail, arguing that the seriousness of the crime and the potential sentence made him a flight risk. His public defender, a wiry man named Tony Russo, pushed back. "Your Honor, Father Donovan is a long-standing member of this community with no criminal history, no prior arrests, and deep local ties. He's not a flight risk. He's a priest." Judge Mallon, a graying man with tired eyes, tapped his gavel lightly. "Bail set at $75,000. Next hearing in 3 weeks." While Father Michael sat in county jail, St. Bridget's felt leaderless. Masses continued, led by visiting priests, but attendance dropped. The donation box was light.
Some parishioners rallied, starting a Free Father Donovan petition. Others stayed away, fearing scandal. And a few, though they didn't say it outright, seemed to be waiting for confirmation of the worst. Maria visited him once a week. The visits took place in a cold room with a plexiglass divider. She always brought him news from the parish, updates about the soup kitchen, and small words of encouragement. "They can't keep you in here forever," she'd say. But her eyes always held that flicker of fear that maybe the system could. "They'll make this about optics," Tony told Father Michael during one meeting. "Priest caught with drugs. It plays well for them. They look tough, you look guilty. But if we can find even a shred of evidence about this mystery guy, we can build reasonable doubt." Father Michael nodded. "The truth is the truth. That's all I have. Sometimes truth isn't enough in here." One afternoon, Elaine herself came to the holding area to speak with him. It wasn't standard procedure, but she claimed she wanted to save the court some time. "Father," she said, sitting across from him, "if you plead guilty to a lesser charge, we can talk about reducing your sentence, maybe 5 years, eligible for parole in 3. You'll be out before you're 70. "I didn't do this," he said evenly. "Juries don't always care about innocence. They care about the story they're told. Right now, the story is that a trusted community leader was smuggling drugs, and that story is airtight. I'm not admitting to something I didn't do." She gave a small shrug, as if she'd expected as much. "Then I'll see you in court." It was Maria, once again, who brought him the first piece of good news. During a visit, she mentioned something offhand. "I was telling my nephew about what happened, and he asked if I'd checked the airport cameras, said maybe they'd see the man you were helping." Tony jumped on it immediately. The defense filed a motion for full CCTV footage from all the cameras in the gate area, not just the one showing Father Michael with the bag. The prosecution pushed back, claiming the footage was irrelevant. The judge ordered them to produce it anyway. As the court date drew closer, tension wound tighter.
The jurors filed in quietly. 9 women, 3 men, all from various walks of life. Some avoided looking at Father Michael altogether. Others glanced at his collar, their faces unreadable. Tony leaned toward him at the defense table. "We need one thing," he whispered. "Reasonable doubt. That's it. But until we get the CCTV footage reviewed, it's going to feel like climbing Mount Everest." Father Michael nodded. His hands were folded neatly on the table, but his knuckles were white. Elaine Keating was in her element. She stood before the jury with a confidence that bordered on theatrical. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "this case is about betrayal. Betrayal of trust, betrayal of faith. The defendant, a man sworn to serve God and his community, was caught red-handed transporting 15 kilograms of heroin through Newark Liberty International Airport. The street value of these drugs is over $500,000, enough to destroy hundreds of lives." She walked to the evidence table, gesturing toward the black roller bag and the neatly stacked brown-taped packages inside. "He was seen with this bag. He wheeled it to the gate. He possessed it. And, as you'll see, possession is 9/10 of the law when it comes to narcotics." Her voice dripped with certainty. The first witness was the arresting officer, Sergeant Miller. His testimony was clinical. "I observed the defendant in the gate area, pulling the black roller bag. Based on an anonymous tip and behavioral cues, we approached him for inspection. Upon opening the bag, we discovered multiple packages containing a white powdery substance. A field test returned positive for heroin." Elaine: "Was there any indication that the bag belonged to anyone other than the defendant?" Sergeant Miller: "No, he was in sole possession of it at the time." Elaine: "Thank you." Tony's cross-examination was short but pointed. "Sergeant, did you personally witness my client acquiring the bag?" "No." "Did you see anyone else with the bag prior to my client?" "No." "So your assumption that it belonged to him was based solely on the fact that he was holding it when you approached him?" "That's correct." Public perception turned. News coverage was relentless. Headlines used words like drug mule and fallen priest. In the parish, attendance dipped even further. The soup kitchen ran on half volunteers. Maria kept rallying support, but even she could feel the tide shifting. The whispered conversations after Mass were no longer about whether he was guilty. They were about why he had done it. Against Tony's initial advice, Father Michael insisted on testifying. He said, "I have nothing to hide. If they hear my words, maybe they'll understand." On the stand, he spoke calmly. He described the young man in the denim jacket, the request for help, the phone call, the moment he realized the bag wasn't his. "I have served Newark for 26 years, he said, voice steady. "I have walked with drug addicts, counseled the homeless, buried victims of overdoses. I would never traffic the very poison that destroys my community." Elaine's cross-examination was surgical. "Father Donovan, you expect this jury to believe that a stranger, whose name you don't know, whose ticket you didn't see, whose face is not captured in the initial security footage, handed you a bag containing over $500,000 worth of heroin, and you didn't think twice? I thought I was helping someone. You didn't think to question why a young man would ask you, a stranger, to carry his luggage?" No, not in that moment. Perhaps because it wasn't his luggage at all, it was yours." The courtroom was silent, except for the scratching of pens on notepads. After 3 days of trial, Tony still hadn't received the full CCTV footage he'd subpoenaed. Each time he pressed the court, the prosecution claimed there were technical delays. On the 4th day, Judge Mullen ordered the footage to be turned over immediately. Elaine's jaw tightened, but she complied. Tony received a hard drive just before lunch recess. During the break, he and his investigator huddled over a laptop in a side room. Hours of footage played out, travelers, gate agents, security personnel, and then there he was. A young man, denim jacket, mid-20s, dragging the black roller bag through the concourse. He stopped near the gate, looked around, then spotted Father Michael approaching. The footage clearly showed him speaking to the priest, gesturing toward the bag, and handing it over before stepping away and pulling out his phone. Tony froze the frame. The man's face was in full view. There was just one catch. The footage didn't show what happened after the handoff. The angle didn't cover his exit. And without proving who he was or where he went, the footage could be spun either way. Still, Tony knew it was a lifeline. He said, "This is it. It's not everything, but it's something." The judge allowed Tony to recall Sergeant Miller for further cross-examination. Tony played the new footage in court, pausing at the handoff. "Sergeant, do you recognize the man in the denim jacket?" "No." "But you agree that this footage shows my client receiving the bag from someone else?" "Yes, it appears so." Elaine immediately jumped up. "Objection! The footage does not establish ownership of the bag or the contents. It simply shows the defendant in contact with another individual." The judge sustained, but Tony saw the shift. A few jurors leaned back, as if a seed of doubt had been planted. As the defense prepared for closing arguments, Tony received a text from his investigator. "Got a hit on facial recognition. Denim jacket guy identified. You won't believe this." Tony didn't have time to respond. The bailiff was already calling them back into court. Father Michael took his seat, unaware that the next day's revelation could either save him or shatter him completely.
Tony barely slept that night. At 6:15 a.m. his phone buzzed again. It was Rick, his investigator. The denim jacket guy? Name's Caleb Rivas, multiple priors for possession with intent to distribute, known associate of the Rodriguez crew. Tony's blood chilled. The Rodriguez crew was notorious in Newark, a tight-knit drug network with a penchant for recruiting unsuspecting couriers as cover. If Caleb was involved, the bag in Father Michael's hands was almost certainly planted. The problem was connecting Caleb to the bag and getting him in court before the trial wrapped. Tony arrived at the courthouse early and filed a motion for a continuance. Elaine opposed immediately, claiming the defense was stalling with irrelevant speculation. But Judge Malin, perhaps sensing something bigger, granted a 48-hour pause. 2 days might not sound like much, but in legal time it was a lifeline. Rick hit the streets, following known hangouts. Caleb had no fixed address, but word was he had a girlfriend in Union City. On the second night, Rick called in a breathless voice. Got him. He's holed up at the girlfriend's place, and you won't believe what's in the car outside. Same make and model as the one seen in the airport parking lot footage. They called local PD. By morning, Caleb Rivas was in custody. Under interrogation, and after realizing the field evidence against him was strong, Caleb cut a deal. He admitted to smuggling the heroin, claiming he had spotted some priest-looking dude at the airport and thought it would be funny and clever to use him as cover. He'd walk away clean, while security wasted time questioning a clergyman. His exact words to police: "Didn't think they'd actually arrest the guy. Guess I overestimated the system." The confession was recorded. Back in court. When proceedings resumed, Tony's demeanor was electric but controlled. He called Detective Alvarado, the lead on Caleb's arrest, to the stand. "Detective, did you apprehend a man named Caleb Rivas 2 nights ago?" "Yes." "Did Mr. Rivas make any statements regarding the bag my client was accused of carrying?" "Yes, he admitted it was his. He said he intentionally handed it to the defendant to avoid suspicion." Tony played the audio clip. The courtroom was so still you could hear the soft hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Elaine tried to recover, but the damage was catastrophic. Jurors who had sat stone-faced for days were now exchanging looks, some even glancing apologetically at Father Michael. The verdict was swift. Tony reminded the jury of Father Michael's decades of service, the absence of motive, and now the confession of the real perpetrator. Elaine, visibly deflated, offered a half-hearted reminder that statements from criminals should be weighed carefully, but her voice lacked conviction. The jury was out for less than 90 minutes. When they returned, the foreman's voice was clear. On the charge of possession with intent to distribute narcotics, we find the defendant, Father Michael Donovan, not guilty. The courtroom erupted. Maria sobbed openly. Father Michael's hands trembled as he gripped Tony's in gratitude. Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions, but he gave only one short statement. "I forgive Mr. Rivas. I pray for him, and I thank God for truth."